I'll let you guys introduce yourselves with your titles. And the way we'll run this is that, I have a couple of things set up for them to talk about. They'll speak. When they finish speaking on one subject, we'll ask them some questions. You're welcome to ask them some questions. Stand up, state your name, ask them a question. We're not gonna argue with them. We're gonna see what they want. We're gonna tell them how we feel, and then we'll move on to the next subject. So we'll try and move through it. When we finish with the topics that we brought them in here to talk about, which is upriver, Parker River, clam flats, extending the days on the contaminated flats, and this amnesic shellfish poisoning. Once that's all covered, we can open it up to any other questions that you guys might have while they're here. Take advantage of it. Tell them what you think, what you want, and go from there. So Jeff, you'll introduce yourself in your title, and Devin yours, and then we can get started any way you want.
Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone for showing up today. I'm Jeff Kennedy. I'm the North Shore Regional Supervisor for the Shellfish Project. And we handle all area classifications, shellfish area classifications from Boston Harbor to the New Hampshire border. We do, as you know, we do shellfish classification of water quality as well as all marine biotoxin testing, and we also operate the shellfish purification plant out on Plum Island. And it covers a lot of different activities. We provide technical assistance to the cities and towns for any of their shellfish management programs. We do environmental review of projects that are happening up and down the coast. And I think we have our water quality, and we do a little bit of shellfish testing as well. We have a small component for research, but that's not our focus. Our focus really is administration of the National Shellfish Sanitation Program here in Massachusetts.
My name is Devin Winkler. I'm an aquatic biologist, and I am on the North Shore team with Jeff as my supervisor. And a couple of years ago, I was given Plum Island Sound as one of the areas that I maintain classification of, and maintaining classification requires me to collect water samples throughout the year under varying conditions, and then writing report using analysis of the results that I get from those tests. And so I know Pete and the other commissioners and Paul had invited us here today to talk a little bit about what's been going on specifically in the Newbury portions of Plum Island Sound, so that would be N4. And I'm here to answer any questions about water quality issues there, or possible shellfish harvesting questions. I've provided to the commissioners and the constable the last 2 annual reports that have analysis of water quality throughout N4 for 2014 and 2015. I'm still working on 2016's data, but I did bring some preliminary results of analysis that I've done using data from 2006 to present to start looking into Parker River classification issues. And then towards the end of the meeting, we can talk about any questions about amnesic shellfish poisoning, because that was also brought to our attention that people had some questions about that. Yeah.
So you want to start with, one of the things was extending the days on the contaminated flats. Is that an option for us?
Well, I just got off the phone earlier today, a conference call with the director. We have a package of different positions we'd like to add in the division, and included in that package is help at the shellfish purification plant. So, in the course of 2 to 3 years, we lost 3 positions, and we've only been able to backfill one of those positions. So it's really just a labor issue at the current time. So if we can get that seasonal laborer on, it'll help us to go back to the 5-day digging schedule. We know it's been difficult for all the claimers. Unfortunately, we've been the rack fees don't pay for the operation of the shellfish plant. They're just a small fraction of the actual cost. So the rack fees are $6 per box, per bushel, and the real costs are probably in that $10 to $12 per bushel range. So rack fees only cover half of our actual costs. So the administration years ago has said we need to be making up, figuring out another way to raise revenue to try to make up that shortfall. We'll never be charging $12 for a rack fee, because that would just put you guys out of business. It's we need to have we need to subsidize the fishery in some way, and this is the way the state does it. But we've been trying to increase revenues in different ways. We allow wet storage now, desanding at the plant, and unfortunately that hasn't really panned out the way we were promised. We had commitments from a number of dealers saying they were going to fill that purification plant. They could fill those tanks and you would be making so much money. Well, of course, that never really materialized. So we've been looking at different ways of raising money, whether it's grants or perhaps bringing in additional areas to the plant, whether it's in-state or out-of-state. But again, those have not really made up much of or any shortfall in the revenue. So right now we have 2 laborers at the plant, and there's a supervisor, Kevin McGowan. I'm going to call out Kevin right here, is the supervisor at the plant now, and there's just 3 of them to move all the product through the plant. So it's hard to cover those 5 or 7 days a week. So we're hoping with the addition of a seasonal staff that maybe we can give you back another day or 2 days to get you digging those the rest of the week. So unfortunately, all this winter when during the drought, we weren't getting a lot of product in. So unfortunately, you bring in 3 or 6 or 9 racks for a day. That's not covering our costs. It's a big shortfall. At a minimum, each tank probably costs $100, $200 a day just to run. And when you're only making $6 a box, you need a lot more product going through. So it's hard. We understand, but we're going to try to get you back. The funding for that position would not be until after the first of the fiscal year. So we're not looking to start any positions until first we get approval from the administration, which has yet to come, but we expect it in a week or 2. And then after that, it'll be after July 1st, once we do all the hiring. So, but we get it. We understand it's a hard thing when you're only digging 3 days a week.
What about, when you have a rain closure and it opens on a Thursday?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys haven't been doing anything while it's closed, right? Or maintenance maybe,
Yeah.
but you're not pushing clams through.
Yeah.
And so, like for us, if we have a rain closure, we can open it on a Sunday. We contact the selectmen, let the clammers know.
Yeah.
Couldn't you not do something like that? I mean,
Yeah, the issue is really with union contracts, what the union allows. We have to provide 2 weeks' notice to change someone's schedule, and we just don't have that kind of time to change it. So,
does anybody have any other questions on this one? Guys, anybody? Go ahead, Bob.
Are there any more areas you could open? That's the biggest reason there's not that many clams going through it.
yeah, so that's a good point.
Well, I'll say point anyway.
No, I appreciate it because
Because I know Rivera's closed.
exactly. We've run into Boston Harbor is used to be the #1 producer of clams in the state, and those clams have just disappeared due to disease and green crab. They've just disappeared. So there is a limited fishery
Yes.
in the summer in Boston Harbor down in the South Shore. We have 1 master digger. He has 10 guys.
We have 2 masters, and between them have about 15 individuals digging.
but they really just dig just
Just
summer.
the peak months, so they're digging maybe May to at most September.
Yeah.
And that's been dicey as well. Weymouth has not had digging in it since, I think, 2010. Hull has been fortunate for most of the time, since we first saw this disease of neoplasia and the death of clams in the fall of 2010. And then it took about a year or so before we started seeing similar patterns in the South Shore area of Boston Harbor. And then Quincy and Weymouth and Hingham followed suit. All during that time, Hull still remained somewhat stable, so that's where the South Shore diggers focused on for much of the past 4 or 5 years. But even that is kind of given up the ghost at this point. And we're just hoping to see it come back. And we've been monitoring for neoplasia and certainly,
Yeah, it's a hard thing in Boston because it had been so productive for so long, and now with disease, it's neoplasia is they call it a clam a cancer, and before the clams get just under 2 inches harvested, they die off, and it's a condition of their blood, of the clam blood, that it can't take in enough oxygen. So usually in times of stress, the end of the winter, early spring, and then again in summer, usually August, late August, is when we see the die-offs happen. And that's what's happened continually every year since 2010 in Boston Harbor. As far as Revere goes, Revere has problems with their outfall, and we did a dye study and identified a lot of breaks in the pipe there. So those being repaired, hopefully we can get Revere back online.
Isn't that just like one area, the Pine River?
Pines River, it has multiple areas, but yes.
Okay, I've never been there, I just was just curious.
But there's really not a lot of other areas available.
Cause guys have told me stories that Gloucester has contaminated areas, I don't know
No.
what they are.
Yeah, most of those areas have actually turned into conditionally approved areas. So those were upgraded years ago.
Is there a Salem Marblehead area that's?
Danvers River, but that's grossly contaminated.
That's grossly, okay.
Yeah,
Just, I hear stories and I never know.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, don't ask, you don't know.
That's right.
In regard to the currently classified contaminated flats in Newbury itself.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've been doing testing since 2006. I'm curious where you're at with that. I mean, once again, rumors are rumors, but I've heard that during the winter time from somebody that used to test for your department, that they tested clean in the winter months and could possibly be open. You say some of the Gloucester flats that were previously contaminated have been opened conditionally for open area
Yeah,
flats?
those flipped back in the 80s.
So where are we at with the Newbury flats as far as testing, and could they be open as contaminated, to contaminated digging? Are they considered mildly or slightly contaminated? at
Where
this
that
point?
line is now, is it Pine Island Creek?
Right.
Everything north of there is influenced by the Merrimack, and those are highly contaminated, grossly. They're not grossly contaminated. They're moderately contaminated, but after rainfall, the water quality degrades enough that they can't be harvested, even with depuration.
Are you saying they're more
So-
contaminated than the contaminated flats we're digging now in the Merrimack and Joppa Flats and
No, those are
areas?
the flats.
No, those are the flats.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those are the flats. So there really
I
isn't.
think we should clarify, I think you're asking about
I'm
west
asking
of
about-
Cottage Road,
Right,
correct?
upper part of
Parker
the river,
River.
Pine Island Creek,
The
and the
Parker
areas that
River,
are
okay.
actually currently considered contaminated in Newbury at this point. But I know you've been doing the testing. I don't know where, where you've tested.
That was our next subject.
That was
That's what-
Yes.
the next
yep.
subject.
Yeah, so if you wanna, if there's no more questions about the contaminated area as far as days opening, we'll go to that upriver in the Parker. Been testing for about a year and a half, we've been chasing you for answers and.
Yes, so like I said, I've been involved for about 2 years, so, for the commissioners and the constable, you can turn to the second portion of this packet. And this is, preliminary data, that I've been working on, and as I said earlier, it's looking at roughly the past like 10 years worth of data. So the third page you wanna go to. This first graph, is for Little River. And the way that the graph is designed is, you can see on the bottom, the horizontal axis, you go from January to December.
Yeah, they don't have access, so I mean, that'll be good for us, and I'll make copies of this for anybody that wants it.
And so Little River, like over the course of a calendar year, the months that it's looking not so great is roughly from May to September, October. That's when you start getting counts that exceed the percentile limit, which would be 31. The dashed line is 14, and the 14 is the geometric mean standard that we have to meet in the National Shellfish Sanitation Program. 31 is also another number, but you can kind of more or less see where the 31 line is on the graph. So those are months where Little River is not looking so hot. If you turn to the next page, that's Hackers, and Hackers has a similar pattern of not meeting in the summer months. But yes, there are the fall and the winter, where the counts are better. The problem, the next page after Hackers, if we start looking at how much data we have every month, in the first column, to the left of, or to the right of where the calendar months are, that's the count of how many samples have been taken in that month. November is really weak. We only have 2 samples at these 2 stations. And that would be the first month we would maybe look at going back in this scenario. And again, this is preliminary data, and this is only looking at dry weather data using the current rainfall standard. I don't know if I go in and I look at this using a more strict rainfall standard, let's say a 1/4 inch, if maybe we would be seeing more of the year open up. Not sure. This is very preliminary look. So, can it be open year-round with the same rainfall as the rest of Plum Island? No. So we're gonna have to dig deeper on this one. And that's where I am so far in analysis.
Anybody any questions?
I think we were kinda looking for a seasonal opening for that, the Hackers.
Okay.
That's what we talked about with Paul Somerville over the years.
And that
We were kinda
was-
hoping to get something like that, and he
it's-
said he got very few spikes in his set of samples that he was taking.
And is the thought more for the oysters
No,
that are in
no.
that part of the river,
Well,
or
no,
is it?
talking about for clams,
for
to
clams?
get that clam flatten operation, and it's turned into a big grass hummock.
Yeah.
Hasn't been worked over for quite a few years.
And of course, middle of the winter is when it ices in, so that's the
Not
harder
always.
part. No, it's not, no, it's not consistent anymore.
Usually like about a week or 2, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got some pretty low numbers
Yes.
from November to April.
That's our problem, is the winter doesn't have a lot
I
of
mean,
data.
even if it was
so,
longer rainfall, closures,
yeah.
Seasonal and with more strict closures, just to get it open once in a while, to go up there and tear it up and hope some of it comes back to productive clam flats. It's not a really big area anyway, but I mean, it's just something to do.
Well, that's what I was, what do you expect to get out of there? Is it,
A seasonal opening would be great. I think
well,
that's
no,
what
I mean, what could it produce for a number of people, is,
Well, they dug it up,
you know.
they dug it, the last time they dug it was when the railroad bridge was being built, right? You guys were up.
Oh, yeah, it was
Before
either
that.
one or 2 days,
Way before
1 or
that.
2 days a week, if I remember
You
right.
opened
and
it a couple of days a week.
And it was like 2 bushel limit, if I remember right,
Really?
back the last time it was open.
Okay. So, how long did that
would
go
be
on
better
for?
than nothing, you know.
I don't know, how long was that open, you know?
It was open until.
Quite a while till they closed
Till
it
you
again,
brought
yeah.
the line down to
Yeah.
Cottage Road.
Right,
when you
but-
go up the line to, Parker Bridge.
yeah. But I mean, how often was it harvested? How often did you hit it? Or-
Quite a bit.
Well, yeah, they said 1 to 2 days a week it was open, and they had a limit on the amount.
It was only 2 bushel, yeah.
Yeah,
It
And
was
it
only
lasted
open
quite,
like
it
that.
lasted quite a while like that, doing
Yeah, but that was only because the whole thing had seeded in.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
decision was, instead of letting people go in and just clean it out,
Right.
pick out a couple days a week with a 2 bushel limit, and once it got dug, then it was pretty much open.
Yeah.
It was open to whoever wanted to go up there until the state moved the line. The line used to be, I think, at the railroad bridge, and then it moved to Cottage to,
Yep.
Plum Island, the Parker Bridge,
Yeah.
1A bridge.
And I've been at this for a couple of years, and I would do shoreline survey work with Charlie back in 1988, 89, and at that time, Little River was much more contaminated. The counts were much higher, and that's what necessitated that movement in the line
Right.
down. Little River is much better today. It's I think they've made improvements. There's probably less animals going into the area, so we definitely need more data in the winter to take a look at. But it certainly looks encouraging. But
Like I say,
Without
just
the data.
seasonal and more restrictive on the rainfall would be no problem at all.
and I think that's what Devin is looking at. So is take a look at that rainfall and see what we can do.
You notice spikes, I mean, I have your numbers, that's about it from 15 and 16. And we were talking about it, we noticed it also over at like Pavilion Beach. You can have a massive spike over, I think I saw a number of 70 over there, which was really high compared to some of the others. And I don't know what year it was, but we're wondering if some of this isn't from the boats, the large boats, just before they're pulled out, guys pumping their tanks out in that area. But we have riverfront there, and you have the same thing over in Ipswich. You'll see Greens Point, the river from Greens Point, you'll see Pavilion Beach being really high. I don't know if that's, are we looking at aberrations on these real high numbers? Is that just a bad test?
Oh, you mean as far as like, why is it going
Yeah,
so
all of a
high in
sudden
the
you'll see it
summertime?
really spike, and then the next test you take, it will be right back down to where it was. And I see the same thing when you test it upriver in the Parker, or even Little River. Once in a while there'd be a spike, but then like, you'd do a 3-day closure and it would drop pretty quickly, which, you do the 3-day rain test. And it seemed to me like it went back to normal real quick. Is it from the boats? or
Yeah,
what?
I mean, some of the rainfall tests that we've done so far, we've done about 3 since I took over, and my curiosity is what we're gonna see going forward now that we're out of the drought scenario, because the numbers compared to what Paul Somerville was getting, he was doing a lot of rainfall testing in 2010, and those numbers were a lot higher than what I've seen in the few rainfall runs that
I
I've
think
done.
Governor Dummer was still dumping directly into the.
We've been doing
Creek
work with Governor Dummers this winter, and they're not shedding anything.
Good,
So that's not the issue.
good.
Plant is not the issue. There's other upstream issues that need to be kind of.
I think also what you
Sussed
see in
out.
the summer is anything that makes it into the river can survive, and it may, in certain places, it could replicate. So there's more persistence in the summer. UV helps, it helps kill, but warmer waters, more activity outside, I think we just see the general background levels go up. So I think that's part of the issue is, it's
So-
hard to say why it's going up.
So testing going forward, are we looking at another year, another 2 years?
We need data.
Is there any way we can help you get the data?
I think it's we're talking about dry weather and wet weather here, so
Mhm.
it's a little bit of everything.
I see the chairman back there.
Yeah,
I'd like you to stand up here on the.
yeah, big chair. Can I sit from back here, please?
No.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and some of the guys might know more than I do, but we're in the midst of, I believe the right terminology is the MS4 testing that John O'Connell's doing. And for the state and federal EPA regulations, our town right now is in the midst of identifying every outfall in the town.
Mhm.
and every outfall is being tested. And if any outfall shows certain types of contamination, we gotta trace it back to where that contamination could be existing. So I should think going forward, especially in our town, because we're very aggressive, and also in a lot of other towns, some of these counts are probably gonna change. Because a lot of these outfalls were never even known about within the towns, and they're finding them all. And we're surprised, I think we got 120 outfalls or something like that in our town. And
Really?
the MS4 area is small, so as we go forward and EPA demands more of this type of testing for towns, you're gonna have places clean up.
It can only help.
Yep.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we, particularly in Newbury, a rural community, there's a lot of non-points, so it's not even as simple as identifying a single storm drain that's going out. It can be runoff from wildlife, it could be farms, it could be horses, just dogs. There's a lot of sources. So, and it's a large watershed, so, but certainly there are things you can deal with, and there are things you can't deal with. You can't deal with wildlife, birds, any of that, but you can deal with storm drains. So I think that's excellent, and it can only help.
With the work that the town's doing to clean up the situations that the councilor just spoke of, is it possible that the 8-day rain closures that we have currently could be reduced? And have you been testing, you know, this, I mean, 8 days seems like a long time. Is that consistent, or is that just something that's been in place for so long that you've kept it that way? But it sounds like the river and the open area flats are a lot cleaner than they once were, you know, and with the regulations on septics and whatnot that are being increased all the time. Could we shorten the closures to 5 days after an inch of rainfall?
I'll let Devin talk about some of the data, but my own feeling is that the 8 days, it was essentially what we found was water quality. Typically in watersheds we see first flush and second flush effects, and so that first flush happens a day after the rain comes down, and then 2 or 3, depending on the size of the watershed, you get a second flush effect. Excuse me. And so we were finding that the second flush would, those counts would drop off below the 14 after about day 6. And so we added 2 days onto that for natural purification. And that's how we developed that 8-day closure. And we're still seeing that first flush and that smaller second flush effect. So it's not as pronounced as it used to be 25 years ago, 30 years ago.
Right, so that 8-day closure is based on current testing data?
Well, I'll let Devin talk about data that she's analyzed that was collected a few years ago. But it
Because
kind
that
of
would
appears
have a
like
big
it's,
impact on
it
income
works.
for some of the people that are doing, you know,
Yeah.
that, I mean, the 8-day closures, if that could be reduced down to 6 even,
yeah.
that makes available 2 additional days.
Now, I'm not saying that Newbury does this, but there has been, towns have used these rainfall closures. It has helped their fishermen by creating conservation and mandatory closures. And it changes every year, as you know. There are some years when you dig a lot more, in a drought over the last year, than you did, you know, in other years when typically we see 30 or 40% of the days closed to rainfall.
Right.
So,
Well, I would agree with you that management is necessary, but I think there's better ways to do it than these 8-day closures if they're not necessary. And that, it probably wouldn't be the state's position to be, you know, managing the flats. That's something the town
Yeah.
should
And
be
I-
in a
I'm not
position
saying
if they wanna, you know, if.
we're leaving that in place.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean,
for that reason, not
by,
all.
you know, maybe closing the flats an additional day every week, the town has the ability to manage the resource.
But I really think the rainfall is that unpredictable, or actually the counts are that variable, that 8-day really does tend to work. The previous biologist was analyzing it years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago. 8 days seemed to work, so,
But N4 is the only area with an 8-day closure though.
that's right,
If you look at all the other areas, even N2, which is contaminated, opens up before.
yeah. With N2, we're able to, because it is depuration, you harvest the clams, they have to go to the plant, and then they have to stay in there 2.5, 3 days, so.
That's not true necessarily, because N2 does have part of its rainfall closure policy, depending on one of the rainfall stations. If it hits a certain target, it will remain closed until testing demonstrates that it's open.
No, I
So
understand that.
it could stay closed for up to 14 days in
Just
that
open
case.
today and N4 doesn't open until Thursday, so
So-
it's just a.
It all depends on the rain that happens in the area, but there are certainly instances when N2 remains closed, when N4 is open.
There's towns 15-minute boat ride away that have, don't get any closures on some of their flats, they're rain exempt. I mean,
Outer Essex Bay, in the winter, has an area that is open, yes. But it's only in the winter, and it's out by the spit, it's right out the mouth.
Ipswich, Essex,
So,
Gloucester.
oh, yeah.
Essex
They all-
Bay,
They all do double ties as well.
Isn't it
Town
a
manager.
aren't the rainfall closures a town thing though?
No, they're managed by the division, and all of the policies have been developed based on data collection. Certainly the N4 8-day, that is not something I've looked at in the past 2 years of taking the project on. I've focused most of my efforts into looking at Parker River exclusively. I have not been looking at the growing area as a whole. That is something I could entertain. Our other challenge right now is that we did have a biologist retire at the end of December, and so now we had to divide all of their responsibility amongst the 4 of us that are left. So I have now taken on the responsibility of Ipswich River, which I kind of like because it does have, you know, relationship with Plum Island Sound certainly, and that will be interesting to look at that relationship, but it's more work, so that kind of puts a, you know, ties me up as far as the extra work that I can do in each one of the communities that I work in, so.
I would think testing the waters in our clean area would be more beneficial to us than
Right.
testing the waters of, like, say Hackers and Little River and stuff like that, if you're putting all your focus on that area.
That's such a limited resource, I think everybody, we've already stated it, I mean, yeah, we could probably get those flats that are contaminated to come back, but it's such a limited resource, it would have very little impact on everyone in the room, whereas if you focused your energy, like Chuck just said, on the clean area flats and potentially, rather than using 25-year-old data on the rainfall closures, if that could be reduced, that would have a huge impact on the income.
okay. So if I can make a suggestion, you make that recommendation to your shellfish commissioners, and they'll communicate with us what their priorities are.
You are testing the clean flats
So,
almost a weekly
Absolutely.
basis, correct?
absolutely.
Correct, but that's during dry weather and that's for maintenance,
So you
that's
need
not
to
to
do a
change rainfall
So you need to
rules.
do it like you do upriver the rain.
Right, so then instead of just focusing on Parker River on a rainfall, I would then have to hit the entire area,
Okay,
which the timing of that becomes challenging in order to cover it all
Yep.
sometimes.
Somebody had mentioned it earlier, is it possible that we could have certain designated volunteers that attend some kind of training and do the testing along with you, since you're very short on personnel, and that's understandable. I know one person can't do it all, but is it possible that we could look at the the Saltonstall Kennedy grant money that's out there and fund that, or just volunteer to do the testing?
If, as far as classification data, we need to collect that, and so we're gonna continue that. But certainly there are requirements that if there's other data produced, we will include that in our analysis. So if you were to do your own testing in town, we would take that data, analyze it, take a look, and try to go from there. But it's, we've tried to, it's not as simple as just going out and taking, dipping a bottle. It has to be, you have to have a plan, has to be directed at, certain conditions. Otherwise, it won't be useful data, so. and we can help you design a plan if that's the way you wanna go.
If you remember, Jeff, I took probably at least half or the majority of the samples about 30 years ago to create this rainfall closure. I went around to Ipswich, Raleigh, and Newbury Flats with my cooler for the bottles, and I took the water temperatures and looked for birds.
And we were facing shutdown back then from FDA,
But I mean, I
so
was doing it for you guys,
it
and I was
it
doing
helped
the
us out.
samples, and that got us the 5 and 8 day closures.
No, don't,
Back
don't,
That was,
don't,
it was a lot of, you're welcome.
don't blame Charlie.
I was going out a day after rain, and sometimes 2 days after, and 3 days after.
The point
You know, I
is,
was
we
working
can
for you
work
guys.
together towards a common goal. I mean, I don't think you have any stake in, as far as like keeping it closed longer if it's not necessary.
No.
And we but we certainly have an interest in opening it earlier after a rainfall if it's possible. And if it's not, you know, that's completely acceptable and understandable, but we should all be working together, like to help you, or in any way we can, or at least it shouldn't be an adversarial relationship. It should be, listen, this is our goal, let's work together to make it happen.
Right, and as I said, the previous area biologist, when he was doing it, beginning in 2008, I think 2008 through 2011, the data did not indicate that there should be a change in that policy. So, you know, perhaps there is a change since 2011, but it's not just 25 years ago. It's more
Okay.
recent data than that. So,
Any more questions on this? So you wanna start on the ASP? We'll really scare you now.
Well, how about doing a thing like what other towns do, in netting, and creating our own shellfish seeding?
But that, we
You would
can't,
just
we
say-
can't do it on the refuge, and that's why if you open up upriver for us, that's an area where we could seed flats.
Yep.
But we're not able to seed flats on the refuge. That's aquaculture.
Tony's isn't in refuge. Don't we have plenty of area that's not refuge?
No, look around when you're all riding.
No,
Newbury's just about
I
all.
mean, maybe we could get the
all
state
So
to
that's,
help
so
us
that's a
change
flat
that
out no
rule,
for the
but
refuge? There's no way to work around that, it would be.
They don't allow aquaculture on their property.
and for anyone that cares to know, the refuge is trying to get bigger. They're in the process now of expanding.
great,
But-
so we need more refuge.
Jeff, you know, with Brad Hill, Bruce Tar, and others, does Marine Fisheries ever receive a benefit from, I mean, these guys could easily contact their senators and their representatives. I mean, do you ever see that flex money when people like the constituency goes after for funding that you guys seem to be lacking?
Certainly, any help we can get is appreciated, and we have a great relationship with certainly
Brad Hill and Bruce?
Brad Hill and Senator Tar. It's,
So my recommendation, guys, and it sounds crazy, but really, you know, flood Bruce and flood Brad Hill. Because you got a pretty strong lobby with a lot of names on the petition. So,
And, so the other thing, would the state be willing to help us work with the feds to open up our flats on the refuge to seeding? Is there anything you could do to put pressure on the feds, or?
in the past, when that has come up, it's gone nowhere. The
Okay.
feds are, it's a refuge. They do not want anything that could possibly adversely affect their mission.
And that's
As a
part of the
sanctuary.
reason we felt that opening up river was important, not just that there's a small area of clam flats up there, but it could be seeded. So that we could start to manage that area a little more than we can downriver.
Earlier, I was asking questions about how often the area was harvested. So my memory, my recollection is Hackers was hit pretty hard, and the recovery took years. And I think part of the reason why is it's upriver. It gets a lot more fresh water, so clams don't grow fast upriver.
Slower growing for sure.
So once you get in there, and if you're not careful, you can dig it out, and they won't grow back very quick. So I think that's another drawback or a concern about planting clams upriver, is they may survive, but they may not grow very quickly.
And not to change the subject, but there's a ton of oysters in that river. And is that something that we'll never harvest? Or did you, you know, you don't
All
think
based
that,
on classification, so if we can get it open for clams, it's open for oysters. It's,
and would we be able to have a commercial oyster season, or would that be up to us, or is that up to you?
that would be up
Up to the
to
town,
you.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Town?
It would be, certainly we need to be testing or cognizant of
If you
of
said,
Vibrio these days.
if you said you had to open it and exclude oysters, we'd be fine with that.
Yeah, no, it's all based on classification, so if it's, what's good for softshell clams is good for oysters. But we would need to be aware that there is Vibrio VP, and we
And
have
we
to
test
adhere
them.
to,
Yeah.
to those VP regulations, which are statewide.
On to the ASP.
Devin has a,
So again, I apologize to the audience, but I have provided to the commissioners and the constable a 5-page packet of information. It's just general. First page has an image of what Sudanese shell looks like, and that's the phytoplankton which produces the toxin that then, if we eat shellfish that have been filtering this phytoplankton, we can get extremely ill and possibly it is fatal. People have not died from amnesic shellfish poisoning since like the early 80s. There was an incident in Canada. There were around 30 people that were affected, and about 4 people ended up dying from that outbreak. But certainly in Massachusetts, we are monitoring. Here on the North Shore, we monitor on a weekly basis for Pseudonetia. And as many people are aware of, the Cape Cod, south of the Cape area was closed last fall, and there's an image, the last page shows the extent of the full closure. But we are monitoring for it, and we increased our monitoring when we heard that there was a bloom occurring on the south of the Cape. And fortunately for us, we did not see anywhere close to the same levels of Pseudonetia cells in our waters. And we are just gonna continue to monitoring. We've actually been monitoring year round because of water temperatures over the winter. And actually Rhode Island, I think they also had a spring closure
they did,
this, in March, I believe.
in March, February, March.
Yeah, but so far the North Shore, we've seemed to be okay as far as Pseudonetia blooms, so we're just gonna continue to monitor. I think on the second or third page, it says what the action level is. There's a certain, there's a federally mandated level of once, and you would measure for the toxin using shellfish meat. So once the cells get very dense, then we would move on to testing shellfish meats.
Is that in Maine too, or is it just down here?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it's on both sides of us.
Yes, both sides of us, and we were lucky. We were lucky.
So when you test, if you find this in Ipswich, will you find this in Newbury? In other words, is it
Not
gonna
necessarily.
be, will you close Newbury if you find it in Ipswich?
Good questions. It's a brand new organism for us to be concerned about. It is, we don't, with PSP, there's a bloom of Alexandrium, the dinoflagellate that starts this PSP. It starts up in mid-coast Maine typically, and currents bring it south. We don't know what the mechanism is for Pseudonetia. We think it might be either an offshore bloom that comes in, or it could just be in situ. It could be here in our mud, and it blooms. Unfortunately, there are, 14 different species of Pseudonetia, and only some of them are toxic. So just by looking at the, organism, you can't tell if it's a toxic variety or if it's not. So we'll look at the phytoplankton monitoring, but the only way we can tell if it's toxic is by testing the shellfish. we have a screening tool that we use to test the shellfish to see if they're toxic. But it's a very crude test, and it can give us basically presence absence. It doesn't give us a number. So we can, if they're high, if it's this test, this screening kit is coded right at the action level, at the 20 microgram action level. If it's above 20, we'll shut down areas. To reopen, we can't use that tool. We have to take samples of shellfish and ship them up to Maine to a laboratory that does HPLC testing on the product, and that will give us an actual number. And using that test, we can reopen. The NSSP does not allow us to use the screening tool, which is cheap. The testing using HPLC is very expensive, $85 a sample. So we don't have that capability in Massachusetts. We have to ship it out to another lab. So closing's the easiest thing you can do. Reopening is much more difficult. And we just don't know how this organism operates. And the fact that a composition of Pseudonychia can have many different species in them, and we don't know which ones are necessarily toxic and how many are required to create toxicity in the shellfish. So it's a very new problem for us, and we're learning.
Is that just in clams, or is it in oysters too?
Any filter feeding animal, so
Right.
all mollusks.
Is it, it's not killed if you cook it like the
No, you cannot kill it by cooking.
clams?
Just like with red tide toxin, the toxin is there. Cooking does not, no amount of heat that you could produce on your stove or frying is going to degrade that toxin.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm just a little confused. Is there a host vector for the bacteria? Is it diatoms? I mean, what is it?
It's not a bacteria. It's a phytoplankton.
What is the phytoplankton? Is it by itself, or is it within inside another host?
No, it's free-floating
Okay.
phytoplankton. And when it's food for the shellfish, and when the shellfish ingest it and break down the phytoplankton, it releases that toxin into their tissues. So it's all dependent on how many toxic species of Pseudonychia are in the water, and the uptake by the shellfish, and then they start to digest those phytoplankton because it is food. It releases the toxin into their body. Same, and PSP works the same way. It's just a different organism, different phytoplankton.
And is this just new because the feds just found it, or is this new? In other words, has this always been here and it's never been really a problem before, and now it is, or a potential problem?
Certainly the organism has been here, maybe not in the same numbers, and we're not sure why there are blooms now. Last fall, there was a bloom in northern Maine, and very soon thereafter, they found it down in Narragansett Bay, and then Buzzards Bay and south of the Cape. So it was sporadic, but around the same time. We just went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was one researcher who postulated that they had a similar bloom in 2015 on the West Coast, up in BC and Washington and Oregon and California. And he surmised that maybe it had something to do with similar conditions to what we had last summer, which was a drought. So it may be linked, that gee, this drought happened and we saw a bloom in toxic species of Pseudonychia.
Yeah, not only a drought, but also the highest water temperatures we've seen offshore.
Right.
Because on the west coast, they were experiencing an El Nino occurrence that was offshore, that they felt helped fuel the outbreak, the bloom that they saw.
And running them through your plant isn't gonna help.
No.
No.
So we're not gonna,
No.
contaminated flats would close too.
Unfortunately not.
So that's not moved around by like seals or something like that then?
No, they just, like any other plankton, they're in the water, and then we're just not sure what causes the
Does it
bloom.
kill animals too, or just people?
Oh,
Um,
that's a good question.
any mammal that might take in shellfish are susceptible to it, so, sure.
Just there's so many seals around now.
Yeah.
They're letting them around.
Big unknown, we really don't know.
Any other ASP questions? We'll open it up just for a little while for just some general questions.
Sure.
One of the questions that was brought up to us is about, the contaminated flats. And a couple of, not extending the days, that was something else, but, so the subordinate digger goes and digs the contaminated flat on a day when there happens to be two tides. Now, they give up their clams as soon as they come off the water. They no longer have possession of them. Can they not, and they cannot go to the Newbury Clean Flats and dig that second tide.
Yeah,
You know, there's a few days that happens, and there's a few guys that can do that.
right.
You know, none of the old guys are gonna do it, 2 tides in a day, but that's verboten, right? It's not acceptable.
Yeah, the way we structured the program was it'd be one day. You know, the last thing we wanna do is curtail harvesting. We want people to have harvesting opportunities. More shellfish is good. So, you know, if the town feels there's a big need and they wanna go to that record-keeping responsibility, if they wanna go through that, they're gonna have to, Paul or someone else is gonna have to do the exchanges and,
Right.
and keep the record keeping. I mean, we could probably work something out, because all the regulations say, is that you can't have a clean permit, you know, at the same time as you have contaminated, so.
Right. And like I said, it's a limited amount of time that would occur, and there's a limited number of people that would take advantage of it, but it is more income.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it would be help, so maybe we can get together on that and make some changes.
Yeah.
That would be really good.
So you're saying you will allow that?
No, I'm not, I'm saying I will
Kinda
consider it.
sounded like it.
I will consider it, and we need to talk about it, because the devil is in the details. And it only takes, you know, one
I know,
mistake to really, you know,
but you know,
throw it all into.
There's no detriment to either town's flats there. We're not digging doubles on the clean area, which would hurt our clean digging. I mean, you're talking 2 totally different areas where we never own the clams in the contaminated area, and the town's okay with it. That would only help us.
My question was that, my wife's the master, and I'm a subordinate, and if
I
did-
work for my wife too, so.
That's why it's called Sugar Mama Show. She's my boss. But the subordinate never owns the clams.
Right.
When I dig them, put them in the truck, they're property of the Commonwealth. They go to the plant, they're property of the Commonwealth. When they come out, they belong to the master. So it's like an overtime shift, what it amounts to. But that's the part I never understood why. Because I have to turn in my open area permit to the town, to Paul. And then after the tide, I can get it back. But I actually can't do 2 tides, I'm too old. But the few guys that would, that's why I was questioning that.
And of course, we designed the process, not just with Newbury in mind, but with Newbury diggers in mind, but with diggers from all over. So from Gloucester and Essex and Ipswich, and so it was collectively what could all the constables and all the towns on the North Shore handle, and you know, what might be possible in Newbury may not be possible in Gloucester or Essex, I don't know. But I think we're mature enough here where the fishery has gone along for a year now, where you know, there's been a shakeout. I think we can re-examine some of the other management plan, stipulations in the management plan to see what can we customize. If you know, it may work for Newbury and you want to go that route, you want that kind of management. Whereas maybe Ipswich doesn't. So, you know, we can discuss that.
Could I dig sea
I'm fine.
worms on the other tide for bait? Because that's the same license.
yeah.
But not if you don't have your license.
Not if you don't have it back.
Yeah.
No, you
So
turn
that's-
it in and you get it back after the time. I'm saying if I wanna dig bait,
Yeah.
that's because the license covers soft shell clams and seaworms.
Right, and of course, with seaworms regulations, there's a state permit, but then there's also, the town can issue their own permit for seaworms.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there may be,
Revenue maker.
yeah, there may be other, there may be other management there that's possible to
It's in the Ansby dug seaworms there, Chris,
Um,
he used to dig worms.
is that-
I remember we used to go 2 times.
That was hard.
We used to go in the report, we'd leave in the report, give them to the master digger, turn in our permit, and then get our town permit and go and dig an open area. Which, depending on the rain closures or whatnot, could add up to quite a few tides. And with all the rain closures and everything being down, sometimes that would bring in a lot of money. I don't think it's a very difficult thing that has to be done. I mean, we have a constable, we have fish commissioners or whatever, we just let them turn their permit in and pick up their other permit. I mean, I don't really see what's so difficult about that.
We'll work it out.
So one of the accommodations we made, we ran into this unforeseen circumstances with that requirement of turning in your permit was someone had a lobster permit. And gee, their shellfish was on their lobster as an endorsement on their lobster permit. Well, if we took that, then they couldn't go lobstering. And that was a problem. So we ended up splitting out the lobster and shellfish into separate permits. So it might be possible to break out just seaworm from your shellfish permit, and that might be an easy fix when it comes to that. So yeah, there's all ways we can look at this. But let's.
It would be more of a novelty if I went.
So, you agree that green crabs are a pest, correct? Jeff?
They are a problem, big problem.
Yeah, I heard that if you find low numbers of green crab, you usually have high numbers of clams. And so I'm talking to Story Reed, I got his name right?
Yes.
I'm not sure which is.
Yep.
So I sent him an email asking that they do away with the season on green crab. Because we did have a trapper that trapped all year. It's a pest.
Right.
Would you back us on that? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, no, I don't think that's an issue.
Okay.
I think
I never heard back.
the director just wanted to have letters of authorization so we know who is out in the
Right.
water trapping.
Right,
You know,
yearly they have to.
whose buoy belongs to who.
Right.
But I don't think there's a problem.
I never heard back. I'll send another email then and
Yeah, I'll bring it up with him as well.
I appreciate it. The last thing I have is, it's on my wish list. Could you move the contaminated line from Pine Island to the bridge? Well, High Sandy has a lot of clams, thin shells. You run them through the plant, nobody wants to buy them, basically. They'd fare a lot better,
Yeah.
and people would buy them if they came off of a clean flat. So I'm sure that's further down the road than my upriver wish list.
Unfortunately, we did a dye study a number of years back, and basically it was very interesting how on the flood tide, they met right about High Sandy was where the tidal node happened. So you had water from the Merrimack coming down, and it would meet the Plum Island Sound water coming from the south, and just about it would meet just about yeah, but actually the dye said it was right around High Sandy, but then Pine Island Creek, but then it seemed that just south of there in Pine Island, but just on the outgoing tide, they didn't just meet and then they go back the same direction. You actually had communication from the Merrimack into Plum Island Sound. So you had water meeting, and then a certain portion of that water was still draining south. So you had Merrimack River water coming down the Plum Island River, and then it would take a tide, but it would end up down in Plum Island Sound. So that's where we came up with that. It's just about where the dye dropped off the most, even though there was some communication happening. So I think that split is probably there to stay.
Okay, I was just kinda hoping,
Yeah.
it seemed like a natural barrier of the bridge, you know, and then we could even change the contaminated area any way you liked it.
Yeah.
Aren't you testing that waterfall? Yeah, is there any testing being done up there?
Aren't you testing that waterfall? Dye test before the new bridge or after the new bridge?
We have,
Before the,
So there was more water flow with the.
we've only tested it
but,
like 2 or 3
Those are
times.
not-
But the comes below.
Anything possible.
They
Yeah,
were, they
you
were.
know, I
Yeah.
suspect
We
that
tested them
that
3
title
times,
node
but-
will not change.
They've been testing up road for 2 years, so.
Anything's possible.
The new bridge is like 100 yards narrower than the old one.
Yeah.
So was it tested before the bridge was begun?
Yeah.
More than that,
Yeah.
So that it is a lot narrower, yeah. I don't know if that's something that we could maybe in the future deal with. We have taken samples ourselves.
Yeah. It's not based on fecal coliform, it's based on dye study, dye work. So,
With the treatment from the Newburyport treatment plant.
well, at the time, it was just a dye release
Oh, really?
right from the bridge. So, and we tracked that dye down the river, you know, into Pine Island Creek and then further south. So, yeah, it wasn't based on fecal coliform, it was really based on movement of
The Merrimack River water.
the water itself, yeah.
And if that was done before the bridge was
Small.
rebuilt, which has really restricted that water coming in, would it be worth, how hard would it be to have another dye test?
Well,
Or could we end up like Revere with,
you use a lot of dye to do those kind of studies, and they do take planning. And dye is pretty expensive, so it's probably not our highest priority. We would be focused on, FDA is requiring us to conduct dye studies at every wastewater treatment plant and to try to create closed safety zones around every wastewater treatment plant outfall and size those at a certain dilution ratio. And we'll be spending our time looking at that before we'll be, you know, trying to modify this. I understand it's important, but both areas are open. They're just open different.
right, but the clams aren't,
Yeah.
they're not sought after, you know, and then you run them through the
Yeah.
plant and they break and nobody wants them, and so that's a problem. And where, as a clean clam, you know, they'd be more viable.
Right.
Didn't they do a dye test at, from the outflow at the Newburyport plant? Cause I was asking one time, like, Jopp is open, Seal Island, but was it pump sand out in the middle, isn't? And they said the dye went straight down towards the mouth of the river.
Yeah, we did do a dye study at the Newburyport treatment plant.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Jeff's actually right, but it might be worth testing the amount of water. We were the people that had the Sandy grant for the last 2 years, and part of the Sandy grant was over $1 million spent with Woods Hole on a modeling project of the Plum Island Bridge. And that modeling project goes from the Plum Island Bridge to the Ipswich confluence and it's going to be able to show hydrology where it goes.
That'd be great.
And it's pretty accurate. So whoever said the bridge difference is significant, it's obviously, it's 200 yards different. And you get exactly what you discussed. We lose water the other way as the tide changes, but it's gotta be less now, and this model will show that, and maybe it will have because we're trying to get culverts put in the bridge, good or bad.
Yeah.
But this model will show, and it might show enough that it's worth, you know, trying to petition the state for a dye study.
Okay.
And
Yeah, no, I'd
we'll
love
be able
to
to run
see
these
it.
scenarios in probably 3 months.
Great.
So, and it's a 3D model, so it's gonna show everything.
We could use that.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have the results.
You wouldn't need the dye study, you would just
Exactly.
use
You
the
can probably-
model.
You know,
Exactly.
sometimes I wonder about ground truth in these things, are they really dead on? But it was Boston University that gathered, Woods Hole that did the studies, and MBL's involved, it's pretty good stuff.
Right, so that may negate the need for a new dye study.
Well,
We may be able to use that.
I'll get you guys all the information the minute they run it.
That's the thing, it's just gonna be a waste of high sandy, it's gonna be a waste of the flat. There's 2 master diggers buying clams up out of this contaminated area, and neither one of them want them anymore. First thing you do is you call up guys that don't dig those potato chips anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Is that just because they're thin, the
Yeah,
shells
they're
are
very-
thin?
they're the
or-
same clams, they're the same clams as Fork
It's
Island,
very
which
hard
is
to-
4 feet away.
To
Across
harvest,
the
put them in a
ditch.
bucket, end up in a bag, and then put them into a basket. And if they all go through the plant too, so you're gonna come out, you're gonna mashed potatoes by the time a couple times, they can't be handled. Very delicately handled.
Right.
Now,
If
on
you
the
get it, you
pollution,
might be able to sell
on
it
the
once.
pollution, are we more worried about the fecal chloroform counts
Where,
in the contaminated area? You said you did the dye, but don't you test for the
Right.
fecal chloroform also?
We use both water and the shellfish. Yeah.
In the federal guideline, isn't there an area in there where you can harvest areas and keep them open just for, if the fecal chloroform counts high, just for sharking or frying clams? I'm pretty sure I read something on that.
No, there's not a dedicated, you can't have a dedicated cooked fishery. No, the assumption by FDA is that all product could be eaten raw or undercooked. So,
When we process them, we hot dip them, and the counts that are high go to zero under certain temperatures. When you process them for frying, if they had a high count and you put them under certain temperature for fecal chloroform, the counts come right down to zero.
the
That's
data
why
that FDA is operating on is there still can be survival of organisms in the shellfish even after frying. But that's not how we classify it. We classify based on the water. For restricted areas, we do use shellfish counts. But for open areas, clean areas, it's based on the water quality.
Anybody got any
So I think the whole question is, the whole answer to your contamination problem is to find the source. Can you do that?
We only go so far upriver, and then after that, it's the local
I think that'll
communities.
answer all the questions we have.
Yeah.
You can find the source, determine where that's coming from.
A lot of times it's a non-point, and that becomes much more difficult, is if it's from wildlife or some other, either, you know, if it's a failing septic system, absolutely, that, correcting a failing septic system, you know, it increases the water quality, improves the water quality instantly, so, absolutely. But we just don't have the ability to go up into every small creek and test every home.
Well, maybe that's where the volunteers could come in.
Is what?
Maybe where the volunteers could come in.
Well, they're doing the outflow pipes, right, so that's part of it. You're doing you're finding the outflow pipes and that'll cut down on it. Does anybody have any other questions? Things
Yeah,
off the wall?
the game wardens come down a pair of weeks ago and they told us that we have to tag the clams on the flats and the raisins and clams can't be friends anymore.
Right,
Why?
right.
We live in the
Regulations,
same mud.
well, the regulations,
Co-mingled.
it's a good question. The regulations say that you have to tag the product and label what they are and the amount.
In the
So,
boat?
on the flat. So, you have to be able to say, gee, it's a half bushel or 1 bag of soft shell clams, 1 bag of razor clams.
What's the difference
So you
between
gotta
doing that
split
on
them
the
out.
flat or doing it as soon as you get back to the land than what we used to do when we put them in the truck?
Well, of course, the regulations are made, you know, statewide. They're not made just for Newbury. And so the regulations down in Cape Cod, they could be harvesting maybe 4 areas and going to 1 landing. And so on those communities, they have to, the idea is you have to tag your product at the flat before you leave the flat, so that when you land, the law enforcement knows exactly where they came from. They came from flat 1, 2, 3, or 4. And that could be true for other areas, but I understand. It's Newbury, if you're landing at Town Landing there, Parker River, they only came from N4. I know that. But the regulations say they have to be tagged on the flat. And my understanding is law enforcement, they want to tell the clammers in Gloucester and Essex the same thing that they tell you in Newbury and Rowley. So,
Well, what about the raises and the clams? What's the reason behind
so,
that?
again, the regulations say you have to tag them, and one of the things you have to say for tagging is, what are they? They're soft shell clams, they're razor clams, so you have to just break them up.
Could you put a tag saying they're a razor clam, soft shell mix?
It has to be separate.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just the way the regulations are written.
One thing, thanks for helping us open the Merrimack. I get it done.
All right, Bob.
Okay?
Thanks for coming, Bob.
Thank you.
See you, Bob.
I guess I got one. I got an email from some alliance. EML, I'd say.
4 days.
Started down the Cape, I have no idea what it is. It's
I went to a meeting of the Shellfish Initiative, Massachusetts Shellfish Initiative, is that what you're?
I guess it is.
Yeah.
Good job.
It's
Thanks for
a,
coming.
a new grassroots organization that's formed, and they're trying to solicit input from all the different user groups, whether they be clammers, whether it's the town officials, aquaculturists, and they want to try to develop a plan for Massachusetts,
Yeah.
just so they can create advocacy for shellfish. And I think the idea is they want to recreate back 30 years ago, there was something called Section 20 money, and Division of Marine Fisheries would reimburse the towns for their local management. And so a lot of towns were able to supplement their management costs, the cost of their constable and other propagation with that Section 20 money. Well, that was eliminated many years ago. And what this group would like to do is, before you can get to that place where they can lobby for money, they need to develop a plan. And they're trying to make this grassroots. They're trying to bring in all aspects, whether it's dealers, aquaculturists, growers, harvesters, wild harvesters, NGOs. They're trying to bring all these people together, solicit their input, and find out what the priorities are. And not just for one industry segment, but for the whole state of Massachusetts.
I'm a bit of a cynic, and I read their website and I looked at their questionnaire.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like what they want is the state to take over the town flats. And you read between the lines, and I'm a cynic, and the other thing was, it seemed like they were a mouthpiece for aquaculture. It seemed like that's who was behind this, aquaculture.
So I would say that means all the more important that you get involved and try to stress what your concerns are and what your priorities are.
I got it all, that's it. Anybody got anything? Questions? I can't thank you guys enough for coming, this is awesome. And we don't get
Thank you. Well, we have a lot of
face-to-face with you
we have a
guys.
lot of other things to work on. So.
We do, and I appreciate all the clammers that came. It's great that it shows these guys that you're interested, their policies mean something to you. So, thank you very much for coming, and coming to the next meeting, we'll sit down, we'll iron it out, figure out what we'll attack next with these guys, and go from there.